Extra gloves? You've had this pair of extra gloves the whole time? Yeah, we're in the Rockies. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to 1994 and check out the movie Dumb and Dumber. It's a classic jump off. I've been watching this since I was 8 years old. It's funny, hilarious. Anyway, welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. So the game I have for you guys right here is from the knockout portion. As you know, we have Levon Aronian playing Timur Rajabov in the finals of the Airthings Masters. You know, this is a good one. It's kind of long, but I've gotten it to where like I'm not gonna, you know, go into like some very deep variations, so it's not gonna take me like forever to display the game. As always, at the end of the video, I have the chess puzzles for you guys, so you want to stick around for that. If you're a diehard chess fan, and for all those people that watch my stuff, do me a favor, please subscribe. I'm getting close to 700, so I just need a couple hundred more, and then I'm good to go. You know, I'll be able to do, you know, some more chess for you guys, take some requests. So if you have any comments, concerns, questions, you know, any feedback on the layout, I will say that my last 4 or 5 videos, I haven't gotten any dislikes. So I was assuming that some of my dislikes were coming from the fact that the words were covering the board. And I have fixed that completely. Even if you're on your phone and you are watching it this way, which is kind of weird. I mean, normally people watch it like with the full screen, but every now and then somebody will, you know, go like this. I even have it to where it won't block the board when you're doing that. So we are good to go. All right, cool. If you guys are ready, let's take a look and see what we have for the game. All right, so we have D4. All right. We got knight to F6, C4. Got G6. Got knight to C3. We have D5. So we have the Grunfeld defense on the board. For all those out there, you know, who like to talk chess openings, this is definitely one for you. So we have bishop to G5. And we have knight to E4. So we have the Stockholm variation of the Grunfeld defense. And so, you know, you have a couple different options as far as this bishop goes. Now, if the knight does take, you know, the knight is trapped, and so H4 would win the knight back. So that's definitely not something, you know, after, let's say, like knight takes D5, you know, the knight would take, you would just simply play H4, and then the knight is trapped. But we do see bishop to F4. And so we have knight takes C3, pawn takes C3, we have C5, pawn takes D5, we have queen takes D5, and we have E3. So we have C takes D4, queen takes D4, so we are forcing a trade of queens because we are also attacking this knight in the corner, and so you can't just simply retreat anywhere because you're going to be dropping the rook. So we see a trade, queen takes C4, pawn takes C4, or pawn takes D4, sorry. Knight to C6, we have knight to F3, and we have E6, and we have the novelty of the game. This is the first time this has ever been played. I mean, the intention is pretty clear. You know, you're trying to probably, you know, check the king and, you know, even come back this way. Once you've already checked the king, you know, you've pretty much done your due diligence because you're affecting the king's ability to castle. But we actually don't see that. After rook to B1, we see F6. Another variation that you could consider, which was actually considerably better for white, would actually be bishop to D3. Because that just allows, in case of a check here, which usually that's the intention after E6, you can simply just play king up, just like this. You know, the king is actually perfectly safe in the middle of the board here because the queens are traded. So like I said, when the king is stuck in the middle of the board, after queens have been traded, it's not so bad. So we see F6, we have H4, bishop to B4 now, and we have king to D1. So like I said, I mean, you know, the king is not really in any danger right now being in the center of the board. There's not a lot of tactics and stuff involved. So we see bishop to E7. We have bishop to C4. We have knight to A5. Bishop back to D3. So we have bishop to D7. We have king to E2. We have castles. We have E4. Rook A to C8. We see bishop back to D2. With the clear intention, we're trying to win a pawn. And actually, that's something that already happens anyway, because you're either going to have to retreat this knight or you're going to have to try to protect it. we have Maxime Vachier-Lagrave actually decides to defend it. And so we have bishop takes a5, b takes a5, and then we see rook to b7. And as you can see, this is a double attack on this bishop here, and trying to pick up this pawn. And so we see rook f to d8. We have rook takes a7, rook to b8. We see rook to c1, rook to b2 with check. So we're covering that with rook to c2. And then after rook takes c2, we see bishop takes c2. And so bishop to b4, we have bishop to b3. So as you can see, Levon Aronian is doing like very good in this game. I mean, he's actually played pretty true to the computer. The computer is, pretty much suggesting everything that he was doing. And as you can see, when you do the piece count, everything is even except Levon Aronian is up a clear pawn. And so we see king to f8. And so we see e5 after pawn takes e5, knight takes e5. We've optimized our knight here. Of course, if the bishop moves or something like that, you're going to be looking at possible bishops coming here and trying to pick up this this under defended pawn. So we see bishop back to e8, like I said, just an alternate move. So we see king to e3. After bishop comes to c3, we do see knight back to f3. And so we have bishop back to d7. So we have rook to c7, bishop to b2. We have knight to g5, and we have h6. And so we have knight to h7 with check. And you really only have one move. Well, actually, there's two moves. Of course, there's 5 total moves, but there's really only 2 moves that you want to make. And the 2 moves you want to make are going to be either king to e8 or king to e7. Because if I show, so king to e8 was what was played in the game. But if we do go king to g8, we're going to be running into knight to f6 with check, and that's just going to be picking up this piece. And then if we went, let's go here. If we went and did, come on, there we go. If we did go king to g7, that would be just bishop takes e6. As you can see, the king doesn't really have the ability to walk back this way. So he might as well just take the knight, and then we're going to go ahead and win, win the exchange and win the piece. And we are up 2 clear pawns, which isn't a guaranteed win, but it's usually winning in an endgame. So, like I said, we did have king to e8, and so we see bishop down to c2, and we have rook to c8. We have knight to f6 with check, and king to e7. So we have rook takes c8, bishop takes c8. We have knight down to g4. And so we have h5. So knight to e5. We have bishop to c1. Got king to e2. g5. H takes g5. Bishop takes g5. And we have f4. Which might look kind of strange at first, but it has a very clear idea. Showing you what the idea is before we get into the actual move that was played in the game. You want the bishop to take here so that you can, throw a little fork on it. Of course, you're not going to want to do that because, you're just going to lose the bishop for free. So we don't want to play that way. But let's go back and, like I said, after f4, we do see bishop to f6. We see g3. We got bishop to b7. We have king to e3. Bishop to d5, a4, so we have king to d6, knight to f7 with check, king back to e7, so we have knight to g5, we have bishop to c6, we have bishop to d1, we have bishop to g7, knight to f3, we have bishop to f6, knight back to e5, bishop to e8, so we're kind of doing like a little bit of, we're doing a little bit of like kind of repeating, trying to get into, a better position. And so we have knight to c4. We have h4. Pawn takes h4. Bishop takes h4. We have knight takes a5. Bishop to e1. Knight to b7. Bishop to c6. Knight to c5. We have bishop to b4. And we have bishop to f3. And now we actually have bishop to e8. Bishop to e2. Bishop back to c6. And then bishop back to f3. And so let me see here. Okay, cool. There's an alternate variation that I want to actually show you guys. Now, we do see bishop back to e8 again, and then we see king to d3. Because we're not going to trade, or we're not going to repeat moves, because that's just going to be a draw. Even though the position is still kind of like pretty drawn. It's pretty even right here. But if we go back, some of you guys might be wondering, like, why are we repeating moves here? And why aren't we just trading? And so to show you the reason exactly why we're not trading, it's kind of a length that I go into. That's not probably ever going to happen, but just I wanted to go through and show you guys this particular variation because it is I think it's pretty instructive to see. So if we did have bishop takes f3, we had king takes f3, and then if we did have bishop takes c5, and then we had pawn takes c5, thinking that, you know, this king is going to be able to come over here and grab these pawns because this king is too far away, you know, then I'm going to be able to show you exactly why that's not going to be the case. And so for any of you guys out there that actually study in games at all, you would have encountered this fairly early on, and that is of split pawns that are one file apart. That they're actually able to protect themselves without the help of a king against a lone king. And so we would see king to d7, and then after a5 we would probably see king to c6, and then we'd see a6. So the main idea with this is the reason why this works is because of what is something called the square of the pawn. Now, I made a video about the square of the pawn, and I'll put it up in the right hand corner. But basically, whenever you have a king, so whenever you have split pawns, you want to keep them right next to each other, right? And then, so basically at the end of the day, once the king does approach one of the pawns, you simply push the other one. And so if the king was to approach this c pawn, you would just push the a6 pawn. And as you can see, the king doesn't have a way to step back here. It doesn't have a way to step to the side. It can only step down. But of course, if it does step down, now it is outside the square of the pawn and it can never catch it. And then that's the same thing. So the pawns could literally just sit here if the king sits there. And then the king can never capture this one because, like I said before, it's just going to push here. So I haven't done a video on that specifically, but I have done it on the square of the pawn. So like maybe that'll help you kind of understand it a little bit more because this might be a new concept to some people. So like I said, we did have bishop to f3, bishop to e8, king to d3. So we didn't repeat. And then so we see king to f6. We have bishop to c4. We got bishop to a5. Bishop to g4, we got king back to e7, we have king to d3, we have bishop to b6, bishop to d1, bishop to c7, we have king to e3, we have bishop to a5, and then we have bishop to b3, and we have bishop to b4, so king to e4, king to f6, bishop to c4, bishop to c6, and bishop to e3. And as you can kind of see, we've almost kind of gone back in the same position that we were in before. So it's just a lot of maneuvering that's going on. You know, there are a lot of different concepts at play when you get into an endgame. There's the triangulation stuff, and you know, there's just repositioning of pieces. And a lot of times when you get into endgames, you know, you're trying to waste a move. So that's kind of what triangulation will do for you. Instead of just going the direct path and taking one move, you want to waste the move kind of and come back. And you know, usually it's a way to give your opponent a unfavorable position. So we have bishop to b5, bishop comes down to d5, we have knight to d3, we have bishop to a5, we have knight to e5, bishop to c7, we have king to d3, we have king to f6, we have bishop to c6, and we have bishop down to b3. So knight comes to d7 with check. So we have king to f5. So we have knight to c5, bishop to a2, king to c3, king takes f4, king to b2. We have bishop to c4, king to c3, bishop back to a2, and we have knight to b7. And this is a very, very accurate move. And so white is actually having quite an advantage here. Come on, yeah, white's having quite an advantage here. And so it's actually becoming harder and harder for black to actually win this. So we have bishop to b6, and we have a5, and this is actually a horrible blunder. This loses the game pretty much on the spot because you're in a position now to where this pawn is almost unstoppable as far as promoting is concerned, and you're most likely going to have to give a piece up at some point for it, or the other pawn. So we have bishop to a7 trying to block the pawn. We have knight to d6. We have e5. We have d5. We have e4. We have knight takes e4. Okay, knight to e4. It might look kind of strange. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video real quick and see a good move that's here for black, go ahead and take a couple seconds here. We'll get back with you. Okay, cool. So it might seem like white hung a piece because this knight is like just free for the taking. Because you're like, why would you take a pawn right by the king? Like the king's gonna take it. Well, unfortunately, so the move that was played is actually king to e5. So going back, if you did have the idea to just take the knight for free, it would actually come at a horrible price because you would see d6. And the problem is, like I said before, the square of the pawn, like you don't have a way to catch this pawn with the king. So you're going to need to back the bishop up to d5, but then you would see d7. And then your only move is bishop to d4 with check. The king would come to b4. The bishop would come back to f6 to protect the d7, the d8 queening square. And then you would see king to b5, bishop to e7, and then you would see a6. And as you can see, this bishop is blocking this bishop's ability to influence the queening square. So that is why king to e5 was played, and we just avoided the knight. So we see d6, we see bishop to e6, king to d3, we got bishop to b8, we have d7, and then we have bishop to c7. And so we have a6, and then now the bishop has to take on d7. So at some point, like I said, one of those pawns we're going to have to give. And so bishop takes d7, we have bishop to b6, we have bishop to c6, we have bishop down to g1. We have king to c4, we have bishop to a7, we have knight to c3, we have bishop to b6, we have knight to b5, we have king to e6, and we have a7. And as you guys can see, if this bishop doesn't take this pawn, the pawn is going to be queening immediately. So the bishop has to give itself up. And for those of you that are familiar with endgames, you know that we are in the rarest endgame in the history of endgames. But as you guys, a lot of you guys know, it is possible to checkmate a lone king with a bishop and a knight. And I'll run through the moves really quickly. It's definitely not something I could fully cover in a video because the video would be like 30 minutes or 40 minutes long. And it's a very, very deep concept. And it's something that's happened so rarely that there's actually a lot of players. I was watching the video about a year or two ago, and this actually came up in a world championship match with the women's world champion. She was not able to do it. She had forgotten how to do it. There are a lot of chess players who never encounter this at all ever in their career. So it's kind of one of those things, you know, if you decide to go ahead and, you know, take the time to do it, it's cool. But I mean, there's a very high possibility that you might never see it. So we have king to d6, bishop to d5, we have king to e5, we have king to c5, we have king to f5, we have king to d4, we have king to f4, we have knight to c6, we have king to f5, we have knight to e5. So the first phase of checkmating the king with the knight and the bishop is complete. And so what we are working on is trying to centralize our pieces. And you can centralize them in just a bunch of different ways. I mean, there's different ways you can do it. But the whole goal is to corral this king to the corner of the board that has the same color as the bishop that you have, because that's the only way you can deliver checkmate. And you have to basically force them. So just to kind of go through, we have king to f6, we have bishop to e4, we have king to e6, we have knight to c4, we have king to f6, we have king to d5, king to e7, we have bishop to f5, we have king to f6, we have king to e4, we have king back to e7, we have king to e5, we have king to f7, we have knight to d6, we have knight to g7, we have king to e6, we have king to g8, we have king to f6, we have king to h8. And this starts the process of pushing the king over to the queen side, which is where we need for it to be. Knight to f7 with check, king to g8, and bishop to g6, forcing the king over because now they only have one move. And so the king would come to f8. We'd see bishop to h7, king to e8, knight to e5, king to d8. We see king to e6, king to c7, and knight comes to d7. It is in this position that that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave actually resigns the game because I mean, not only are these players like best friends, you know, they know each other fairly well, and so I mean, you've already demonstrated up to this point that you know this endgame. you know, basically when we get in this position here with the knight, we are doing it's a W movement. So you'll see this knight come here, you'll see this knight come here, you'll see this knight come here, and it's just gonna basically just be doing a W. And there's a couple different methods that you use, but anyway, that is that game. Get into this chess puzzle that I have for you guys before. We see rook to e2. That is the answer, because of course you cannot take here because you're gonna be seeing this. King would come over, and then you see checkmate. So rook to e2 is the move, and even if you tried to check here, the king would come up. And you know, you're gonna be pinning the king to the queen to the king. And so looking at the next chess puzzle, this is a deflection and it's a medium level. So that is that. And I appreciate you guys coming by. Merci beaucoup. Salamat. Kaibagan. Appreciate everything. And I will see you guys next time. All right.